My stepdaughter forged court papers to kidnap my sick wife, so I had her arrested and walked away from the chaos. But 18 months later, she came back unexpectedly, carrying her late mother's long-lost journals and offering an apology so raw and shocking that it completely changed everything I thought I knew about our family, the past, and even myself. They say love can conquer all, but what if love becomes the very thing that makes you vulnerable to betrayal, especially when the person you do anything for starts to slip away? What if the fight to protect that love unleashes a kind of hatred you never knew existed? I was 55 when I met Linda. She was 39, and honestly, I didn't expect to fall head over heels at that point in my life. But she walked into my bookstore, looking for something about grief, and she never really walked out again. It felt like finding my missing piece. Linda had a daughter, Emily, who was 16, and from the moment we met, Emily made it crystal clear she wanted absolutely nothing to do with me. She was embarrassed by my age, said the kids at school made fun of her for having an old man dating her mom. I just wanted her to approve of me so badly. So I went all out. Bought her a whole piano just because she kept talking about wanting to learn it. Of course, it didn't work. She even spilled soda on the keys and walked away laughing. When she turned 17, things escalated. She became openly hostile, for no reason I could understand. She accidentally deleted every single document from my new work laptop. My entire last year's worth of work, just gone. At her birthday party, she told all her friends I was her arranged grandpa, who came back to beg for her love. It was brutal. But then, she turned 18, moved out, and went no contact. I thought that was the end of it, and for a while, it was. Linda and I lived a quiet, warm life. Our days were filled with ceramic figurines we collected on travels, and porch coffee when we were at home. We got married barefoot on a Sunday morning. She looked at me, her eyes full of light, and told me I was the only place that ever felt like home. But then, everything changed. Linda got sick. Early onset Alzheimer's. Aggressive. Unforgiving. She started forgetting small things, then big ones, then everything. One day, she looked at me with those beautiful, confused eyes and asked who that kind man with the bookstore smile was. That's when Emily came back. Linda, in her confused state, let her in, forgetting everything Emily had done to me. Soon after Emily's return, the money started disappearing. When I asked about it, Linda just shrugged, saying she only wanted to help her daughter. She needs a car, new tires, rent, she'd say. I tried to push back, but Emily snapped. She screamed that I stole her mother, that I was never her father. She begged Linda to send me away, and Linda, confused and exhausted, just asked me to leave. That night, I slept in my car. In the morning, she called me Henry. My name is Martin. That same week, I went to court. Linda's doctor signed off. She was declared legally incompetent and moved to a care facility. It broke my heart, but I knew it was for her safety. I took it upon myself to make sure she knew I still loved her. I visited every day, played her music, brought her soft things, set our figurines on her windowsill. Once, she looked at me and said, "You're the man who brings me stars." But then, one day, I walked in and found every gift I'd ever given her shattered. Broken shards of porcelain and glass everywhere. Emily sat nearby, cool as ice, saying Linda had a fit. I checked the cameras. My stomach dropped. Emily had done it deliberately. When I confronted her, she just sneered. Now she won't have to pretend you meant anything to her. I didn't yell. I opened a trust, moved what was left of our savings, and replaced the figurines. All but one, that is. The little ceramic lighthouse, the one I kept on my bedside table. After that incident, I started keeping a detailed log of everything Emily did. I wasn't trying to build a case against her, or anything dramatic like that. I just needed to keep track of what was happening because sometimes I questioned if I was overreacting. The spiral notebook filled quickly with dates, times, and brief descriptions of events that seemed minor individually, but formed a disturbing pattern when viewed together. The nurses at Linda's care facility started noticing things too. Nurse Catherine, a kind woman with salt and pepper hair, who'd been caring for Linda since her admission, pulled me aside one day and mentioned that Linda seemed more agitated after Emily's visits. I nodded, but didn't say much. What could I say? That her own daughter was deliberately upsetting her? It sounded crazy even to me. I got a call from the facility director, Willie, about a week later. He told me Linda had been found wandering the halls at 3 a.m., crying and looking for a home. When they finally calmed her down, she mentioned Emily had told her she needed to escape because bad people were coming for her. I drove over immediately. Even though it was the middle of the night, the facility was eerily quiet, just the soft beeping of medical equipment and occasional footsteps of night staff. Linda was sleeping when I arrived, her face peaceful for once. I sat in that uncomfortable vinyl chair until morning, just watching her breathe. The next day, I confronted Emily in the parking lot of the care facility. I kept my voice low and calm, asking her why she would scare her mother like that. Emily just laughed in my face. She told me Linda was her mother, not mine, and that I was just some old creep who took advantage of a vulnerable woman. I stood there, keys digging into my palm, as she walked away. I wanted to shout after her, but what good would that do? Linda would just hear the commotion and get upset. I started coming to the facility at random times, hoping to catch Emily in the act of something. One afternoon, I walked in to find her going through Linda's personal items. She had Linda's jewelry box open and was pocketing things. These weren't even valuable pieces, just sentimental stuff like the necklace I gave Linda on our first anniversary. A simple silver chain with a small sapphire pendant that matched her eyes. When Emily saw me, she didn't even try to hide what she was doing. She just said Linda wanted her to have these things. Linda was napping and couldn't confirm or deny this. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the little moments Linda and I had shared that were represented by those trinkets. The ceramic dolphin from our trip to Florida, where Linda had laughed as the waves chased her across the sand. The little glass star from the night we saw the meteor shower, huddled together on a blanket in our backyard. All these memories that Linda could no longer hold on to herself. Emily was systematically erasing them. I called my old friend Harold the next morning. He's a retired attorney who specialized in elder care, a man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses who'd been coming to my bookstore for years. I explained the situation over coffee at his kitchen table. Harold listened carefully, occasionally jotting notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he looked up at me with serious eyes. He suggested I document everything and consider getting a restraining order against Emily to protect Linda's assets and well-being. I balked at the idea. A restraining order against her own daughter? It seemed so extreme. Instead, I decided to try reasoning with Emily one more time. I invited her to lunch at a neutral place, a diner halfway between our homes. To my surprise, she showed up. For the first 20 minutes, everything was civil. We talked about Linda's care, the progression of her disease, mundane things. Then I brought up the missing jewelry and the frightening stories. Emily's face changed completely. She leaned across the table and whispered that she would make sure Linda forgot me entirely before the end. She said she'd been researching ways to trigger memory loss in Alzheimer's patients. I felt sick to my stomach as I paid the bill and left. That evening, I got a call from the facility. Linda had been found with pills that weren't prescribed to her. The staff had no idea where they came from, but they were strong sedatives that could have seriously harmed her given her condition and other medications. I drove over immediately, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I arrived, I found Linda groggy but okay. The nurse, Jean, pulled me aside and showed me the pills they'd found. She mentioned that Emily had visited earlier that day. I couldn't prove Emily had given Linda those pills, but I knew. I just knew. I called Harold again that night and told him I was ready to take more serious steps. He helped me draft a letter to the facility, requesting that they limit Linda's visitors to an approved list that didn't include Emily. I provided them with documentation of all the incidents. The facility director, Willie, was sympathetic, but explained they couldn't legally prevent Emily from visiting unless there was a court order. So that's what I did next. I filed for a temporary restraining order based on the evidence I had collected. The hearing was set for the following week. In the meantime, I hired a private caregiver named Blake to stay with Linda during visiting hours. Blake was a former nursing assistant who now worked independently, with gentle hands and a quiet demeanor that seemed to soothe Linda. Their job was simple: don't leave Linda alone with Emily. Emily must have sensed something was up because she showed up at our old house the next day. I was there packing up some of Linda's favorite books to bring to her room. Emily barged in without knocking and started screaming that I was stealing her inheritance. I tried to explain that these were just books for her mother to look at, but Emily wasn't listening. She grabbed a framed photo of Linda and me on our wedding day and smashed it against the wall. I stood there, surrounded by broken glass and the torn photograph, as Emily stormed out. I picked up the pieces of the frame carefully, salvaging what I could of the photo. It was one of the few pictures where Linda was looking directly at the camera, her eyes clear and full of love. Now, it had a jagged tear right through the middle. I taped it back together as best I could and put it in my pocket, close to my heart, where Linda would always remain, even if she no longer remembered me. The hearing for the restraining order was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. I wore my only suit, the navy one I bought for Linda's cousin's funeral 3 years back. It felt tight around the collar now. I hadn't been eating right since all this started. The courthouse was one of those imposing brick buildings with too many stairs out front, the kind designed to make ordinary people feel small and insignificant. I arrived 30 minutes early and just sat in my car, watching people come and go, wondering about their stories. A young couple held hands as they climbed the steps. An elderly man struggled with a cane. A harried-looking woman herded 3 children in matching outfits. Emily showed up with a young man I'd never seen before. He looked like a lawyer type, slick hair, expensive watch, leather briefcase. They walked right past my car without noticing me. She looked determined, her chin tilted up in that stubborn way she'd inherited from her mother. I gave them a few minutes before heading in myself. Inside, I found Harold waiting by the water fountain. His familiar face a welcome sight in this unfamiliar territory. He'd been my attorney for years, handling the bookstore's lease renewals and the occasional contract dispute. But this was different. "You ready for this, Martin?" he asked, adjusting his glasses. His kind eyes betrayed his concern. I nodded, not trusting my voice just then. The knot in my stomach tightened as we walked toward the courtroom. The hearing itself was brief and anticlimactic. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, reviewed my documentation. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Emily's lawyer argued that I was trying to separate a daughter from her sick mother out of spite. His voice was smooth and practiced, making even the most outrageous claims sound reasonable. When it was my turn to speak, I simply showed the judge the photos of the broken figurines, the delicate porcelain birds Linda had collected over decades, the records of the missing money, and the report from the care facility about the unauthorized medication. My hands trembled slightly as I passed the documents forward. The judge granted a temporary restraining order, but only for the care facility premises. Emily could still contact Linda by phone or visit her if Linda was taken elsewhere. She tapped her gavel with finality, already looking toward the next case. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was something. Emily stormed out without looking at me, her heels clicking aggressively on the marble floor. Her lawyer lingered to tell me this wasn't over, his breath smelling of coffee and mint as he leaned in too close. I thanked Harold for his help, and we went for coffee afterward at the small shop across from the courthouse. He seemed more worried than relieved, stirring his coffee absently while staring out the window. "She's going to escalate, Martin," he said, the spoon clinking rhythmically against the ceramic mug. "People like Emily don't back down easily. They take these things personally." He was right, of course. The very next day, I got a call from Blake, the private caregiver I'd hired for Linda. They told me Emily had shown up at the facility with police officers, claiming I was financially abusing Linda. The officers carefully reviewed my legal guardianship documentation and the restraining order, explaining to Emily that I had full legal authority over Linda's care decisions as her court-appointed guardian. They noted the restraining order in their report and left without incident. But the message was clear. Emily was willing to go further. Blake sounded shaken on the phone, and I could hear the disruption it had caused in the normally peaceful care unit. I started spending even more time at the facility. The staff got used to seeing me there from morning until evening. I'd bring books to read to Linda, the mystery novels she'd always loved, poetry collections, sometimes just the newspaper. I read to her, even though she rarely seemed to follow the stories anymore. Sometimes I'd just sit and hold her hand, watching the sunlight move across the room, casting patterns on the pale blue walls. Those quiet moments were precious to me, even as they broke my heart. The woman who had once remembered every customer's reading preferences, who could recite entire passages from her favorite books, now struggled to recognize her own husband. One afternoon, I arrived to find Linda unusually agitated. She was pacing her small room, her thin hands fluttering like trapped birds. Nurse Catherine, a kind woman with gentle hands and a soft Caribbean accent, pulled me aside to explain that Emily had somehow gotten Linda's phone number and had been calling repeatedly. During these calls, she'd been telling Linda that I was stealing her money and planning to put her in a worse facility. Linda, in her confused state, had believed these stories and was now terrified of me. Catherine's eyes were sympathetic as she delivered this news, her hand resting lightly on my arm. When I entered her room, Linda shrank back against her pillows, her eyes wide with fear. The sunlight that usually made her silver hair glow now cast harsh shadows across her face. "Don't hurt me," she whispered, pulling the blanket up as if it could shield her. I stood frozen in the doorway, my heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. Nurse Catherine gently suggested I give Linda some space that day. I nodded numbly and left, sitting in my car for nearly an hour before I trusted myself to drive, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Linda's frightened face, hearing her trembling voice. Our bedroom felt too large, too empty without her presence. Around 3 a.m., I got up and started writing her a letter, explaining who I was, how we met at a literary festival in 1982, our life together running the bookstore, our small garden, our Sunday morning rituals. I included photos. Us at the beach with Linda's wide-brimmed hat, in front of the bookstore on opening day, dancing at our small wedding with wildflowers in her hair. I didn't know if it would help, but I had to try something. My pen moved across the paper until dawn broke, spilling my heart onto the pages. The next morning, I brought the letter to Nurse Catherine before going to see Linda. She read it and gave me a sad smile, her dark eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'll make sure she sees this when she's calmer," she promised, carefully folding the pages. "But Martin, you should know, with Alzheimer's, these delusions and fears can become fixed. It might not change how she feels." I nodded, understanding, but still hoping. When I visited Linda later that day, she was calmer, but still wary. She allowed me to sit across the room from her, watching me with cautious eyes as I told her stories about the bookstore, the time a famous author had stopped by unannounced, the cat that had adopted us and lived among the shelves for 15 years, the children who grew up attending our Saturday morning reading circles. I didn't try to touch her or move closer. Just being in the same room, without her being afraid, was enough for that day. The afternoon light filtered through the thin curtains, casting everything in a golden glow that felt almost hopeful. Over the next few weeks, a new routine developed. I'd visit Linda daily, each time staying a little longer, moving a little closer. Some days, she'd remember fragments of our life together. "You make good pancakes," she'd say suddenly. Or, "Did you water the ferns?" Other days, I was a complete stranger, someone to be regarded with polite distance or vague suspicion. The facility staff were amazing, showing her the letter and photos whenever she became confused about who I was. Slowly, her acute fear of me subsided, though the trust we once shared remained elusive, like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. Then came the phone call that changed everything again. It was Willie, the facility director, his voice tight with professional concern, the kind that immediately sends ice through your veins. "Mr. Martin, there's been an incident. Linda is missing." I nearly dropped the phone, my heart lurching painfully in my chest. "Missing? What do you mean missing? How can she be missing from a secure facility?" My voice rose with each question, panic edging in. Willie explained that Linda had been signed out for a doctor's appointment by someone claiming to be her daughter. The staff member who processed the sign-out was new and hadn't been properly trained on verifying legal guardianship status or checking the restraining order list. By the time they realized something was wrong, Linda and Emily were gone. I could hear the regret in his voice, but it did nothing to calm the storm of fear rising within me. I called the police immediately. They took a report, but initially treated it as a civil matter rather than a potential criminal issue. The officer explained that since Emily was Linda's biological daughter, they needed to establish clear evidence that removing her from the facility constituted a crime rather than just a family dispute. When I showed them my guardianship papers and the restraining order, their approach changed. They upgraded the case and promised to send officers to Emily's last known address. The officer's voice became more engaged as he understood the legal implications of removing someone under court-appointed guardianship. I called Harold, who advised me to check Emily's apartment immediately while the police were en route. I drove there like a madman, running red lights and taking corners too fast, my tires squealing in protest. The streets blurred around me as I focused on a single thought, finding Linda. When I arrived, the apartment was dark and empty. Neighbors hadn't seen Emily or Linda. I tried calling Emily's phone repeatedly, but it went straight to voicemail. I left increasingly desperate messages, pleading with her to bring Linda back, promising not to press charges if she returned her safely. My voice cracked as I begged, all pride forgotten in my desperation. After hours of searching and calling everyone I could think of who might know Emily, I returned to my empty house, defeated. I sat on our porch swing, Linda's favorite spot, and tried to think clearly. The gentle creaking of the chains matched the rhythm of my racing thoughts. Where would Emily take her? Not to a hospital or another care facility. They'd asked too many questions. Not to a hotel. Linda's condition required too much care. It had to be somewhere private. Somewhere Emily had access to. Then it hit me, Linda's sister, Ruth. They hadn't been close in years, but Ruth had a cabin about 3 hours north, nestled in the pine woods near a small lake. Linda had mentioned it once or twice, saying Emily used to spend summers there as a child. It was remote, private, and Ruth rarely used it anymore. It was a long shot, but it was all I had. The realization sent a surge of adrenaline through my exhausted body. I grabbed some clothes, Linda's medication that I kept as backup, and hit the road. The drive was torturous, every minute stretching into what felt like hours. I kept imagining Linda, confused and frightened, not understanding why she'd been taken from her safe place. The rural roads were dark and winding, my headlights cutting through the night as I pushed northward. Rain started to fall about halfway there, making the roads slick and visibility poor. My windshield wipers hit a frantic rhythm that matched my pulse. I arrived at the cabin just before dawn. A single light glowed from inside, casting a warm rectangle on the wet ground outside. I parked a little way down the road and approached on foot, not wanting to announce my arrival. The wet leaves squelched beneath my shoes as I crept closer. Through a window, I could see Linda sitting in a rocking chair, a blanket around her shoulders. She was staring blankly at a TV that wasn't turned on. Her hair was uncombed, and she looked smaller somehow, more fragile. Emily was nowhere in sight. I tried the door locked. I considered breaking a window, but worried about frightening Linda. Instead, I knocked gently. After a moment, I heard footsteps. The door opened to reveal not Emily, but Ruth herself. She looked older than when I'd last seen her at our wedding. Her face lined with new wrinkles, her once auburn hair now completely gray. "Martin," she said, clearly surprised. "What are you doing here?" She clutched her robe tighter around herself, glancing nervously over her shoulder. I quickly explained the situation, Linda's condition, Emily's behavior, the restraining order, the unauthorized removal from the facility. Ruth's expression changed from confusion to horror as the full picture emerged. "Emily told me Linda wasn't being properly cared for at that place," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "She said you were keeping her mother away from her out of spite." I had no idea. Ruth invited me in. The cabin smelled of pine and coffee, with an underlying mustiness from being closed up too long. Linda didn't recognize me, but she wasn't afraid either. She just continued rocking, occasionally humming to herself an old folks song she used to sing in the bookstore. Ruth explained that Emily had gone into town for supplies and would be back soon. We needed to act quickly. I showed Ruth the guardianship papers I'd brought with me. She read them carefully, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, then nodded. "I'll help you get her back," she said. I had no idea things had gotten this bad with Emily. She always was headstrong, but this... She shook her head, lines of worry deepening around her mouth. We were gathering Linda's things when we heard a car pulling up outside, tires crunching on the gravel driveway. Ruth peeked through the curtains, her body tensing. "It's Emily," she whispered. "What do you want to do?" I didn't want a confrontation that might upset Linda. "Let's just leave. You can tell her we took Linda back to the facility where she belongs." Ruth nodded and helped me guide Linda to my car. Linda came willingly, seeming to trust Ruth implicitly, even if she didn't remember her. We had just gotten Linda settled in the back seat when Emily's car came into view, headlights sweeping across us. She saw us and slammed on her brakes, jumping out with a face contorted in rage. "What the hell are you doing?" she screamed, running toward us, her boots splashing through puddles. "Get away from my mother." Ruth stepped between us, her small frame somehow imposing in that moment. Emily stopped. "Emily, this Martin has legal guardianship. Linda needs proper care." Emily tried to push past her aunt, but Ruth stood firm. Years of teaching high school had given her the ability to stand her ground. I got in the driver's seat and started the engine. Through the rearview mirror, I could see Emily and Ruth arguing. Emily gesturing wildly, while Ruth remained calm but immovable. As I pulled away, Emily broke free and ran after the car, pounding on the trunk and screaming. I accelerated gently, not wanting to jar Linda. In the back seat, she was remarkably calm, looking out the window with mild interest as if this was just a Sunday drive. "Are we going home?" she asked, her voice small and hopeful. "Yes, Linda," I said, my eyes filling with tears. "We're going home." The drive back was tense. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Emily's car in pursuit. Linda fell asleep about an hour in, her head resting against the window. I called the facility to let them know I had found her and was bringing her back. They were relieved and promised to have medical staff ready to check her over when we arrived. We made it back to the facility by mid-afternoon. The staff rushed out to help Linda inside. Their faces were a mixture of relief and concern. She went with them docilely, showing no recognition of the place or people. Dr. Jeffrey, the facility's medical director, examined her and reported that she seemed unharmed but was dehydrated and had missed several doses of her medication. The interruption in her routine and medication could cause setbacks in her condition, he warned, his normally cheerful face solemn. I spent that night in a chair by Linda's bed, watching her sleep. The facility made an exception to their visiting hours given the circumstances. The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the heating system and Linda's gentle breathing. I studied her face in repose, the fine lines around her eyes from years of laughter, the small scar on her chin from a childhood fall, the curve of her lips that I knew better than my own. I dozed off sometime before dawn and woke to find Linda staring at me curiously. "You're the bookstore man," she said, a faint smile playing on her lips. It wasn't full recognition, but it was something. I smiled back, my heart both full and breaking. Later that morning, Harold arrived with paperwork for a more comprehensive restraining order. The unauthorized removal from the facility gave us stronger grounds. He also suggested we file for a change of Linda's phone number and additional security measures at the facility. What about Ruth? I asked, remembering her help. She helped us in the end. Harold considered this, tapping his pen against his legal pad. We can make an exception for supervised visits if you think that's appropriate. She is Linda's sister, after all. I agreed to this compromise. Ruth had been misled by Emily, but had done the right thing once she understood the situation. I didn't want to cut Linda off from family who genuinely cared for her. The new restraining order was granted quickly given the circumstances. The facility implemented stricter sign-out procedures and added Emily's photo to a list at the front desk. They also instituted a verification protocol requiring staff to confirm the identity and legal authority of anyone attempting to remove a resident, especially those under guardianship. For a few days, things were quiet. I dared to hope that maybe Emily had finally accepted the situation. Then the call started. Not to Linda this time, but to me. At first, I answered, thinking maybe Emily wanted to apologize or at least talk rationally. Instead, I got threats, accusations, and once, just sobbing. After the third call, I stopped answering numbers I didn't recognize. The calls came at all hours, during dinner, in the middle of the night, early morning. Each one left me more unsettled than the last. One evening, I returned home to find my front door slightly ajar. I approached cautiously, calling out but receiving no answer. Inside, the house had been ransacked. Drawers pulled out, contents dumped on the floor, books thrown from shelves, their spines cracked, pages bent. Our wedding photo lay shattered on the floor, the frame broken and the photo itself torn to pieces. The destruction was methodical, targeting the things that mattered most. Photo albums, keepsakes, Linda's favorite reading chair, slashed open. I called the police, who came and took a report. They dusted for fingerprints, but warned me that unless something valuable was taken, this would be treated as a simple breaking and entering. I didn't care about valuables. I just wanted to know if anything of Linda's had been taken. After the police left, I began the painstaking process of cleaning up. As I sorted through the mess, I realized something was indeed missing: Linda's journals. She had kept diaries for years, recording our daily life together. They weren't valuable to anyone but us, but they contained our history, memories that Linda herself could no longer access. I felt sick thinking of Emily reading through those private thoughts, possibly using them against us somehow. The next day, I received an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside were torn pages from Linda's journals, specifically entries where she had written about arguments or frustrations with me. Normal relationship stuff, taken out of context. Along with these pages was a note in Emily's handwriting. Still think she was happy with you? I showed the note to Harold, who advised me to document it, but not respond. She's trying to provoke you, he said. Don't give her the satisfaction. I took his advice, but it was hard. The thought of Emily destroying Linda's journals, her memories, her voice, was almost too much to bear. I threw myself into caring for Linda, spending every possible moment at the facility. The staff began to treat me like one of their own, saving me a chair at their break table, bringing me coffee without asking. About a week after the break-in, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was Ruth. Martin, I'm worried about Emily, she said, her voice tight with concern. She's been saying some really disturbing things. I think she might be planning something. My stomach dropped. What kind of things? Ruth hesitated. She keeps talking about rescuing Linda from you once and for all. She mentioned something about Linda's will and how you've manipulated it. I don't know exactly what she's planning, but I'm scared for both of you. I thanked Ruth for the warning and immediately called Harold. He suggested I check if Linda's will had indeed been changed recently. We had both created simple wills after getting married, leaving most things to each other with a small bequest to Emily. Harold made some calls and discovered that a new will had been filed just 3 days ago, purportedly signed by Linda, leaving everything to Emily and explicitly disinheriting me. This is forgery, Harold said firmly. Linda has been declared legally incompetent. She can't sign a new will. We filed an immediate challenge to the will. The lawyer who had filed it claimed Linda had lucid moments and had expressed clear wishes during one of these. It would take time for the courts to sort it out, but Harold was confident the fraudulent will would be thrown out. Meanwhile, I remained vigilant at the facility. I warned the staff about the situation, and they promised to be extra careful about who was allowed to visit Linda. I started spending nights there again, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair by her bed, waking at every sound. The squeak of nurses' shoes in the hallway, the hum of the medication cart, the occasional call from another resident. One night, I was awakened by Linda calling out in her sleep. No, please don't, she murmured, her face contorted in distress. I gently took her hand, and she calmed without waking. As I sat there in the dim light, Watching her chest rise and fall with each breath, I realized how exhausted I was, not just physically, but emotionally. The constant vigilance, the fighting, the fear, it was wearing me down to nothing. The next morning, Nurse Catherine found me still sitting there, staring into space. She brought me coffee and sat beside me, the scent of her subtle perfume mingling with the institutional smells of the facility. "Martin, you can't keep this up," she said gently. "You're going to make yourself sick." I knew she was right. But what choice did I have? If I let my guard down, Emily might find a way to take Linda again, or worse. Catherine seemed to read my thoughts. "We all care about Linda too," she said. "The whole staff is watching out for her. You need to take care of yourself as well. Linda wouldn't want you to suffer like this." I nodded, too tired to argue. Catherine suggested I go home, shower, and rest for a few hours. She promised to call me immediately if anything happened. Reluctantly, I agreed. At home, the mess from the break-in was still evident despite my attempts to clean up. I took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away some of the tension in my muscles. Afterward, I lay down on our bed, still our bed in my mind, even though Linda hadn't slept there in months. I didn't mean to fall asleep, but exhaustion claimed me almost instantly. I woke to my phone ringing. It was dark outside. I'd slept the entire day away. Panicking, I grabbed the phone. It was Willie from the facility. "Martin, you need to come right away," he said, his voice urgent. "Emily is here with a man claiming to be Linda's new lawyer. They have papers. They say they give Emily authority to move Linda to a different facility." I jumped out of bed and threw on whatever clothes were closest. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I grabbed my keys and the guardianship papers I always kept on the counter now, and raced to my car. The drive to the facility was a blur. I ran at least 2 stop signs and probably broke every speed limit. All I could think about was getting to Linda before Emily could take her again. When I pulled into the parking lot, I spotted Emily's car right away. That stupid red Mazda with a dent in the passenger door from when she backed into a fire hydrant last year. There was another car next to it, some fancy black sedan that probably belonged to this so-called lawyer. I parked crooked across 2 spaces and ran inside. The scene in the lobby hit me like a punch to the gut. Emily was standing there with some slick-looking guy in an expensive suit, definitely not Harold style. Willie was blocking the hallway that led to the residents' rooms, his arms crossed over his chest. 2 security guards flanked him. Emily was waving papers around and yelling about patient rights and legal authority. When she saw me, her face twisted into something ugly. "Oh look, it's the old man who thinks he owns my mother," she spat. I ignored her and went straight to Willie. "What's happening?" The lawyer guy stepped forward before Willie could answer. "I'm Jeffrey Blake, representing Emily Richardson. We have documentation authorizing the transfer of Linda Richardson to Pinewood Care Center, effective immediately." He tried to hand me some official-looking papers, but I didn't take them. Instead, I pulled out my own guardianship documents. "These say I have legal authority over Linda's care decisions, not Emily." The lawyer barely glanced at my papers. "These new documents supersede those. They were signed by Judge Tatum this morning." My stomach dropped. How is this possible? Harold would have been notified if there was a hearing. Something wasn't right. Willie must have been thinking the same thing because he said, "I've called the police. They'll be here shortly to sort this out." Emily laughed. "Go ahead. The police will just confirm what we're saying. My mother is coming with me." I felt dizzy with panic. I couldn't let Emily take Linda again. Last time had been bad enough, but now she had some lawyer helping her. Who knew where they'd take her? Just then, Nurse Catherine appeared from the hallway. She walked right up to the lawyer and looked at his papers. After a moment, she looked up with narrowed eyes. "These aren't right," she said firmly. "I've worked in healthcare for 27 years. I know what court orders for patient transfers look like. The formatting is all wrong, and that's not Judge Tatum's signature." The lawyer's confident expression faltered for just a second. Emily grabbed his arm and whispered something urgently. He cleared his throat and said, "The documents are in order. If you refuse to release the patient, we'll have no choice but to call the authorities." "We already did," Willie reminded him. "We stood there in this tense standoff for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes." Finally, 2 police officers walked in. One was young, probably new to the force. The other was older, with a salt and pepper mustache and tired eyes that had seen it all. The older cop, whose nameplate read Officer Keith, took charge immediately. He examined both sets of papers carefully while his partner kept everyone separated. After a few minutes, he handed the lawyer's papers back. "Sir, these documents appear to be falsified," he said calmly. "The court seal is incorrect, and I personally know Judge Tatum's signature. This isn't it." The lawyer's face went pale. He looked at Emily, who was staring daggers at him. "You told me these were legitimate," he hissed. Emily ignored him and tried a different approach. "My mother needs me," she pleaded to the officer. This man is keeping her from her family. She's confused and scared. Officer Keith wasn't buying it. Ma'am, according to these valid guardianship papers, Mr. Martin is your mother's legal guardian. There's also a restraining order prohibiting you from visiting this facility. Emily's lawyer started backing toward the door. I was not aware of any restraining order. I appear to have been misled about this situation. I'll be leaving now. Emily looked panicked as her lawyer abandoned her. You can't do this, she shouted, looking around wildly. She's my mother. The younger officer stepped forward. Ma'am, please lower your voice. We need to discuss the falsified documents you presented. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. They weren't going to let Emily take Linda. She was safe, at least for now. While the police were dealing with Emily, I slipped past them and hurried to Linda's room. I needed to see her, to make sure she was okay. Linda was sitting in her chair by the window, looking out at the garden. The evening light made her silver hair glow. She turned when I came in, and for a brief, magical moment, I saw a recognition in her eyes. Martin, she said softly. There you are. I knelt beside her chair and took her hand. I'm here, Linda. Everything's okay now. She smiled that beautiful smile that had first caught my attention in the bookstore all those years ago. Someone was shouting. It scared me. I know, I said. I'm sorry about that, but it's quiet now. She nodded and went back to looking out the window. The moment of clarity was already fading, but I was grateful for it all the same. I sat with her until she dozed off in her chair, then carefully helped the night nurse get her into bed. When I returned to the lobby, Emily was gone. Officer Keith explained they'd issued her a citation for the falsified documents and violation of the restraining order. She'd be summoned to court, but they hadn't arrested her. You might want to get a more comprehensive restraining order, he suggested. This one only covers the facility. Based on what I've seen tonight, you probably need broader protection. I nodded, too exhausted to explain that we'd already been trying to do exactly that. I thanked everyone, Willie, Catherine, the security guards, the police officers, and headed home. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me shaky and drained. The next morning, I called Harold first thing and told him what happened. He was furious that Emily had tried to forge court documents. This was exactly what we needed to get a more comprehensive restraining order, he said. This crosses a line, Martin. Forgery is a serious offense. The judge will see she's not just being difficult, she's breaking the law. Harold was right. 3 days later, we were granted an expanded restraining order that prohibited Emily from coming within 500 feet of Linda, me, or any facility where Linda resided. She also couldn't contact Linda by phone, email, or any other means. I thought that would be the end of it. Surely even Emily wouldn't risk violating a court order again. I started to relax a little, spending more time at the bookstore, which I'd been neglecting. My assistant manager, Dorothy, had been keeping things running, but the place needed my attention. Returning to the familiar shelves and the smell of books was comforting. Some of our regular customers asked about Linda, and I gave them the simplified version. She was ill and in a care facility. Most didn't press for details, just offered kind words and support. About 2 weeks after the incident with the fake lawyer, I got a call from Ruth. She sounded upset. Martin, I need to tell you something, she said. Emily came to see me yesterday. She was acting strange, talking about how she needed to save Linda from you before it was too late. She kept saying she was running out of time. My grip tightened on the phone. Did she say what she was planning? Not specifically, but she asked if I still had a key to your house. I told her no, of course. Martin, I'm worried. She doesn't seem stable. I thanked Ruth for the warning and immediately called a locksmith to change all the locks. I also installed a simple security system with cameras. It wasn't fancy, but it would alert me if someone broke in. I didn't think Emily would try to hurt me, but after everything that had happened, I couldn't be sure. The next few days passed quietly. I visited Linda every day after closing the bookstore. Her condition was stable, which the doctor said was the best we could hope for. Sometimes she knew me, sometimes she didn't. I treasured the good days and tried to accept the bad ones. Then, one evening, I came home to find my security system had been triggered. The alert on my phone showed that someone had entered through the back door about an hour earlier. I should have called the police, but I was tired of involving them in this mess. Besides, I had a pretty good idea who it was. I cautiously entered through the front door. Nothing seemed disturbed in the living room or kitchen. I moved through the house room by room, turning on lights as I went. When I reached our bedroom, my bedroom now, I guess, I found Emily sitting on the bed, holding something in her hands. It was the ceramic lighthouse, the one figurine I'd kept for myself when Emily destroyed the others. This was from Maine, she said without looking up. Mom loved Maine. I stayed in the doorway, keeping my distance. Yes, she did. Emily turned the lighthouse over in her hands. She used to take me there when I was little, before you came along. I didn't know what to say to that. It was true. Linda and Emily had vacationed in Maine when Emily was young. Linda had told me about those trips, how they would collect shells and build sandcastles. "Why are you here, Emily?" I finally asked. She looked up at me then, and I was shocked by how tired she looked. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. "I found Mom's old journals," she said. "The ones I took from here." My heart skipped. Those journals meant everything to me. "And she wrote about you a lot." Emily's voice was flat. "She really loved you." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "I always thought." Emily trailed off, then started again. "I always thought you were just some creepy old guy who took advantage of her. That she was lonely after Dad left, and you were just convenient." I leaned against the door frame, suddenly feeling every one of my years. "I loved your mother from the moment she walked into my bookstore," I said simply. "I still do." Emily was quiet for a long moment. Then she held out the lighthouse to me. "I'm sorry I broke the others," she said. I was so angry. I took the figurine carefully, our fingers not quite touching in the exchange. "Why were you so angry, Emily? What did I ever do to you?" She looked down at her hands, now empty. "You made her happy," she whispered. "After Dad left, she was so sad for so long. Then you came along, and suddenly she was happy again. But not because of me. Because of you." The realization hit me like a wave. All this time, all this anger and resentment, it wasn't really about me at all. It was about a daughter who felt replaced in her mother's heart. "Your mother never stopped loving you, Emily," I said gently. "Never. Even now, when she doesn't remember much else, she sometimes talks about her beautiful daughter." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Really? Really?" I took a risk and sat down on the edge of the bed, not too close. "Linda has enough love for both of us. She always did." Emily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "It's too late now, isn't it? With her condition." "It's never too late," I said. "She has good days and bad days. On the good days, she'd love to see you. The real you, not the angry version." We talked for hours that night. Really talked. Maybe for the first time ever. Emily told me about growing up with Linda, about her father leaving when she was 12, about how hard it was watching her vibrant, intelligent mother disappear into the fog of Alzheimer's. I told her about meeting Linda, about our quiet life together, about how scared I was of losing her completely. By the time Emily left, something had shifted between us. Not forgiveness, exactly. Too much had happened for that. But understanding. Maybe a truce. The next day, I called Harold and asked about modifying the restraining order to allow supervised visits between Emily and Linda. He was skeptical, but agreed to file the paperwork if that's what I wanted. A week later, I sat in Linda's room at the facility while Emily visited. It was a good day. Linda was alert and recognized both of us. Emily had brought photo albums from before my time, and the three of us looked through them together. Linda pointed at pictures and told stories, some accurate, some confused, but all told with animation and joy. "You were such a good swimmer," she told Emily, pointing at a photo of a gangly teenage Emily in a one-piece swimsuit. "You taught yourself the butterfly stroke one summer." Emily smiled. "That's right, Mom. You remember." Linda patted Emily's hand. "Of course I remember. You're my daughter." Over the following months, we settled into a new routine. Emily visited Linda twice a week, always when I was there. The facility staff remained cautious, but gradually relaxed as they saw the positive change in Emily's behavior. Linda seemed to enjoy the visits, though she didn't always remember who Emily was. As for me and Emily, we weren't friends. Probably never would be. But we found a way to coexist peacefully, for Linda's sake. Emily even helped out at the bookstore occasionally, organizing events and managing the social media accounts I'd never quite figured out. Linda's condition continued to progress, as we knew it would. The good days became fewer, the moments of recognition briefer, but she was safe and as comfortable as possible, surrounded by people who cared for her. One evening, as I was leaving after a visit, Nurse Catherine walked me to the door. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "in all my years of nursing, I've never seen anything quite like this." "Like what?" I asked. She gestured vaguely. "This situation with you and Emily. Most families torn apart by this disease never find their way back together." I shrugged. "We did it for Linda." Catherine smiled. "Yes, but it's more than that. You both chose to put love above anger. That's rare." I thought about that on the drive home. Maybe she was right. In the midst of all the pain and loss, something good had emerged. Not what I would have chosen, not what I would have predicted, but something valuable nonetheless. When I got home, I placed the ceramic lighthouse back on the mantel where it belonged. Linda might not remember our trip to Maine anymore, but I did. I remembered everything for both of us now. The good and the bad, the joy and the pain. And somehow that was enough. It had to be.